Outlay Committee regarding a review of the anticipated version of the capital plan.
All right, Mr. Chairman, let me hit record, and then that will signal channel 18 to broadcast, and then you can repeat that.
Okay, if I can remember.
This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to everyone. Today is December the 11th. It is now 1:03 in the afternoon, and this is the Capital Outlay Committee. And I'll go around the horn. Everybody, please. This is Rich Larius. I'm the chairman. And if we can go around the horn and just introduce yourself, please.
Joe McFarland.
Bruce Nightingale.
Noreen Donahue.
John Shorey, Chair of Finance Committee.
Joe Powers, Interim Town Administrator.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we have one more to identify herself.
Carol Capola, Finance Director.
Great. Welcome aboard, Karen. We all got a copy of the suggested capital plan. I made a few notes to myself, and I haven't shared it because we just got this yesterday, but we've had it electronically. This has been a very, very different kind of year for all of us, and it's also been a very difficult year to communicate in terms of getting things done, and so far remote from the normal way we proceed on this. The majority of the Capital Outlay Committee has done this, I would say, for greater than 10 years. We've gone through a number of town administrators that do it differently, but in essence, the process has been that I may be off by a couple of weeks or months, but the normal operation is that we start meeting in October, and we meet normally monthly, but during October and December, it's sometimes 2 times a week, trying to get all the departments in and reviewing their requests, and trying to come up with the requests that turn into actual numbers for us to use once we approve them. And it is the charge of the town administrator to define the method of funding. And this is not the way we're doing it this year. And maybe, Joe, you can tell us and update us on what we see in front of us, basically.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, let me say to you and the members of the Capital Outlay Committee, thank you for your participation today. And much more than that, thank you for your patience through the fiscal year 21 process, which, as you stated, Mr. Chairman, was drastically impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. I know I had hopes that when we got into the fall of 2020, that we would be meeting in person, and yet here we are still meeting remotely and expecting to do so for at least the first quarter of the next calendar year. And reminding everybody that a big impact on that was the postponement of our annual town meeting for fiscal year 21 until Saturday, September 26th. In the end, however, I think we can all look at that as a very successful town meeting, because first, we had it. It was turned out to be a beautiful day outdoors, and we accomplished everything we had to do. And I would like to build off of that cheery assessment. Unfortunately, fiscal year 22 has a number of challenges, which of course are impacting upon the proposed capital plan. And I was relieved to hear, Mr. Chairman, that you got it in the mail yesterday, even though members have had it electronically. I wanted to make sure everyone could have it in front of them. But what you'll see is a draft capital outlay plan for fiscal year 22 that encompasses capital plans, capital items that have been noticed in prior years. It's what I would consider to be the regular fiscal year 2022 requests, which were augmented by some carryovers that were deferrals because we simply didn't have the financial resources to capture many of those. And so what you see in front of you, and if you can look on page 4 of the document, and I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to share my screen as well, so that anyone watching this on Channel 18 or looking at it in the future will have access as well. If you look at page 4, and document is dated December 2nd, 2020, so I've not made any alterations, changes, or anything to this since then. On page 4, you can see the summation for fiscal year 22 is we're looking at a total of $20,307,279 in capital requests presently for fiscal year 2022. When you
Joe,
add to that, sure, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
No, I just, you want to add, go ahead. Let you finish your thought, and then I just have a question.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just simply to add that you can then see the full roster of community preservation applications that the town is looking at, recognizing that that is a separate and distinct funding source, but knowing that we've always tried to accommodate or account for that because it does relate to capital projects in the plan itself. And then, Mr. Chairman and members, the last thing I will say is that there are bound to be errors in this document. And as I suggested to you in my email last week, despite the exceptional efforts of our finance director to put me on the right path, I suspect that there are errors, and those errors are mine and mine alone. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield to you as chair.
Okay. So that we can start this, and I know we have a time concerns and so forth. A couple of things I want to ask, and I want to make clear to the public also, is that any request that we're going to be talking about is going to be greater than $50,000. So we just put that in your mind. And I counted them last night, and there's 29 requests that are over 50. Give or take 29. There's a couple that I've sort of put together because if you don't do one, you can't do the other. That's one. Number 2, Joe, is regarding the, we spoke in the fall, personally, there are carryover numbers. This committee has approved or had approved the budget for the request for FY21. And since they were deferred, to expedite our effort today, I'd like to have you just enumerate or identify which ones that have been approved. What we're going to try to do today is approve the ones that have not been approved and are new. And if there are none, then this meeting is to just say that it's the approval carries over. So any changes that go up or any new ones that are added have to be voted upon. That's correct, right, Joe?
That's correct. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and get my notes on the what I recall to be some of the carryovers, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, for the past 10 years, and I'm just going to say for the past, okay, what we were able to see was what was the year before. And we were also given the opportunity to vote, see what it was the year before, see what the request was, and then a column to see what the the money that we approve. So if someone just put in $200,000 and we might approve 150. So I just want to throw that out to you too. It's just a matter of how this thing is structured. And unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity, or we didn't have the opportunity to meet 14 or 15 times to come up with a number. And that is just the way it is. So it's not anyone's fault. So I thought we could expedite it, Joe, by just starting with administration and tell us if anything is new or if there was a changed number. Can you do that for us?
I certainly can. I just want to add real quick, we've got someone else that joined as a caller.
Yeah.
If they could just identify themselves.
Somebody just join in.
So it's *6 on your phone if you need to unmute, excuse me.
Take it away, Joe.
Yeah, we'll try and get that person identified for the record. Mr. Chairman, what I can do is go through the plan and identify it, what I see by highlights. The first highlight that I see that was a carryover is under the fire department on page 2. And you can see the pump and ladder requests converted to the pumper ladder called Quint of 1.1 million.
Yeah.
That obviously was a big carryover from the year before. Now, having said that, I know that it was approved by this committee in the past. I'm still going to be working with Chief LeBlanc to ascertain that that is in fact the correct number, and it is their effort to continue on with that purchase.
Okay, can you, so that everybody can just, rather than going from different department to different department, is there any way, Joe, that we can start with administration with that
Sure.
$50,000 one?
Yeah,
And
so
just
my
work-
understanding is these were all previously approved. I'm not certain that in administration that I'm going to be able to go forward on the Harwich Center ADA sidewalk project as was originally conceived in the application. I can share with the committee that there is an effort under an emergency grant program from the state through Department of Transportation called Shared Streets. You may have heard the presentation several weeks ago that we may be looking, we may be able to obtain some funding. Now, while that is capital in nature, we have no idea how much of the $300,000 that's available for a grant application we would acquire, but it also requires a quick turnaround and a quick project to be completed by the end of May. So my understanding is that original line that you see there in the capital plan is a carryover. I haven't had a chance yet to work with staff to evaluate if that's going to go forward. It may also be postponed or withdrawn.
That's the 50 grand.
That's correct.
Okay,
Are we gonna leave it in the plan?
At present, Bruce, that's my recommendation, is at present to leave it in the plan.
sidewalks, Bruce, sidewalks.
Oh, my favorite.
How about the 200 and the 400, Joe?
So again, my understanding is that those were carryovers. I would also recommend that they remain, given the latest news that town engineer presented to the Board of Selectmen regarding, again, support by Department of Transportation, which is significant. I'm led to believe we've been trying to do this for years, and there's been sort of an arm's length approach to it. We expect to hear in January if the town's efforts on that sidewalking can proceed to the next step. And that meeting in January would be a critical milestone for us to achieve. We've never made it that far with this project, so I would recommend that these carryovers remain.
Okay, well, sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Didn't we
I
already
think-
$150,000 previously? And that money is being held someplace?
I didn't hear the whole question, Bruce. I'm sorry.
I think we've already approved $250,000 for sidewalk construction, and that money is being held someplace.
So I will ask the finance director, based on her reaction, if you could rescue me from this one, Carol.
We do have an outstanding appropriation for $250,000 that we're carrying forward every year until those amounts are expended. So that is correct. That's a correct statement.
So if that's the case, maybe we need to do something about the 600,000 if we've already got 250,000 set aside.
I'm not familiar with the program. I think that prior administrator was familiar with the program of how that $250,000 was going to be expended. So we can definitely look into that for you and get back to you with more details.
Wonderful. Is that okay, Bruce?
Yeah, we need the sidewalk. And I know we already have money set aside.
Okay.
I don't want to put
Can
money
you
in the
please,
plan if we don't need to.
okay. Can you mute if anybody's using another phone?
I think that was Joe. I've muted him for now. Mr. Chairman, if I can, first of all, my thanks to the finance director. I will indicate that you're going to hear a similar line where I'm still struggling to bring myself up to speed on many of the capital projects that have carried over. But if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on Bruce's question, the original application that was submitted for the Saquatucket Harbor sidewalk projects indicates a total construction cost of $850,000. And so if you look at the numbers that are present in the plan, plus what the finance director just confirmed, it appears
Right,
to be
that's
that would finalize the full expected construction costs. But
Okay, you want to check that out,
everything.
Joe?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, could you say again, please?
Yeah, just check it out.
Will do.
Bruce, Joe, did you have a question?
I do too.
Hey, Joe.
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Let's go down.
Mr. Chairman, Noreen has a question, I believe.
And,
Go ahead,
and,
Noreen.
and John behind me, okay? And, it's been, some of these numbers we haven't really discussed in a while. Is of this either 600,000 or 850,000, is that totally our portion or is any of that part of a grant source?
So according to the original application, there's an indication that additionally, the recommended method of financing indicates a Mass Works or other type grant of $400,000. And then it says other, previous 250 plus, and 450,000.
That is us.
So that would appear to be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, this is Angelo Lamantia.
Hey,
Can I ask a
Angelo.
question?
Oh, Angelo.
Sure.
I just got, I was able to get onto my phone. I didn't work on my computer. I don't understand something, and perhaps I was a couple of minutes late, but it looks like there's a total of about $22 million of dollars to be spent on this year's project. Is that so? Is that what we are allowing to happen? Or do we have to go and do this that shows exactly what it costs for each project? I mean, are we going to come up with $22 million for this?
It's actually 20 million, Angelo. The other CPC of 2 million to make it 22.
20 million. Okay,
Yeah, well,
well,
we're looking at 20.
So,
we're looking
Mr.
at
Chairman, if I
20.
can answer that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Angelo, nice to have you. I'd like to say nice to see you, but that's not the mechanism we're in, but good to have you. No, that's one of the things I indicated at the top of my presentation that I'll get into more in depth as we've gone through this plan. We have very significant impacts on the fiscal year 2022 budget. And I pledged to the department heads and the applicants that anyone that had a project that was deferred in 21, that I would carry it over for discussion and consideration in 22. However, throughout the summer, in anticipation of our annual town meeting in September, and every opportunity since then when I present to the board, I indicate the dire financial situation that I believe we find ourselves in presently. So no, I don't believe that we can accommodate all of the 20 million plus that are presented here on the plan. If I can just very quickly take this opportunity to also just advise the capital outlay, while recognizing it's not necessarily in your purview, I do want to let you know where we stand on the operating budget, because as the finance director can attest to, my directions to budget makers, be they department heads or agencies, was fairly significant, and given how the town has done it in the past. As you may know, the Board of Selectmen directed me to work on a level funded budget for general operating expenses. And as you may know, working off of the Department of Revenue's definition of level funded budget, that's going to cause cuts to operating budgets because we have to account for fixed and mandated costs. In addition to that, I have directed departments to factor in a 0% increase on cost of living adjustments for any employees not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, which would be anyone like myself under a personal services contract or anyone under personnel bylaws. And then for the remaining collective bargaining groups, there are 5 of 8 that are coming up for negotiation for fiscal year 22 adoption, presumably, that they should factor in 0% cost of living. And so that's meant to underscore what Carol and I see to be a very difficult budget outlook right now. And it also does not, at this present time, factor in any projections on revenue whatsoever. And so, Angela, I thank you for the question because that was going to be my summation as well. I'm presenting to this committee a capital outlay plan that accounts for over $20 million. But as the chair stated at the top of the meeting, it falls to me working with the finance director to figure out how to fund it. And I know we don't have the funding available for all the projects. So what I'd like to be doing today, Mr. Chairman, if I could say that, is just to update the committee on where I think we are with this plan. I know that there are some towards the end that deal with wastewater, where I know the numbers have already changed since I presented this as of December 2nd. But I know that was a long answer to a short question, Angelo, but I hope that sort of helps level set everything for the committee.
Well, what it does to me is if something we can postpone, that's a good way of saving money. And
Yeah, it is.
We probably should look at every one of these projects, and the first answer you have to have is, do we have to do it now? If that's a yes,
that's why I want.
I'm sorry.
Let me jump in because we're spinning our wheels and we'll be here till 4 o'clock if we don't.
Okay.
Our normal procedure is to go. This is alphabetically down, and what you missed, Angelo, was that basically the numbers that appear in 22 are actually pushed forward what we approved in 21. Now, what I'd like to do is I highlighted, and there are 29 requests that are greater than $50,000, and we've only gotten down to the 3rd one so far. And we've got the caveats, and we've got the work that Joe has put into these numbers. And what if our charge is, and the charter that we've had is, we recommend a number, and it's up to Joe and Carol to find out funding. If in fact they can't get the funding, that number does not appear. All it is approved should there be funding. So that's the caveat.
Okay.
Correct, Joe?
It is, Mr. Chairman, and if I could add, And again, I apologize. I will argue till I'm blue in the face that I'm very familiar with capital plans and town meeting, having done it for the vast majority of my adulthood. I have very little knowledge and understanding of how we operate here in Harwich, so I'm a novice here, and I beg your indulgence in that regard. But I want to make clear that the reason why I had the effort to get this out to you as quickly as I could, even though it doesn't feel necessarily quick for you folks, is that we have charter obligations wherein, and Finance Committee Chairman Troy can speak to this better than I, but the Finance Committee will be conducting a public hearing on this plan as is required by the charter next week. And all of that is meant to culminate with this board, the Finance Committee, meeting jointly with the Selectmen on December 21st for the full vetting, if you will, through the board of Selectmen on this. So I was trying to get a document together to meet those charter obligations. I'm aware through council that one could argue that we're still under the exigency caused by the pandemic. I don't want to rely upon that. I want to get back to normal, whatever sense of normal that is, because I want us to meet on Monday, May 3rd in the community center. But my understanding is we have to have this exercise today because it's required. There's an exercise to occur Tuesday evening, and then there's an exercise on December 21st.
Okay. So that we can move forward, and not that I'm certainly, if we have questions, but the work that Joe put in is obviously here. He's done a great job on it with little background on our part, except one meeting with me 2 or 3 months ago. What I'd like to do, if I have your approval, is to go through each department. And again, the assumption is that there is nothing new here in terms of requests. I know we don't have last year's, what we approved in 21, but we have to put it in good faith that we're just pushing it forward and that it's been approved. Unless there's some new number here, Joe, you know, we can move ahead in terms of just going briefly through these and see if we still agree on what we agreed upon last year.
So, yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I've heard you correctly, I can confirm that I directed department heads and other applicants throughout the 21 town meeting process that I would not be accepting any new applications, understanding ahead of time the pressures that the deferrals would cause. There is nothing new here. That's not to say that departments and other folks are looking to amend it, but I'll have those conversations with them separately. But to your point, and I just want to validate one item in that regard, and it was related to wastewater. The numbers that are there carried over, but obviously those are going to bear much more discussion, especially since the Board of Selectmen had their special meeting on Tuesday and are starting to take up wastewater at every meeting starting next Monday. But no, I can tell the committee that I've not added any new numbers or changed any numbers in an upward direction.
If anybody on the committee has a question, why don't we start, Joe, so that we can get to wastewater? Let's go down by department and see if we have any questions or we need a better understanding of the number that we approved last year. How's that? Is the committee okay with that?
I have a question.
I'm fine.
Okay. Who's got a question?
John Shorey here's got a question. And
Go
when
ahead.
you say carried forward, does that mean it was not approved at the September town meeting?
It wasn't included in town meeting.
It wasn't included, okay.
Correct.
Okay. It was on the plan last year, but it wasn't included or what was approved at 21.
They're called, they were deferred, and you're seeing the deferral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Because I
Correct,
see
Joe?
that-
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I promise to be brief, but if you recall, I believe the total capital budgets, total capital plan for 21 totaled about $4.3 million, which I know
probably.
is a significant change. Yep,
Okay. I
Which was
understand.
probably wastewater.
correct.
Okay. And the Quint.
The Quint came off.
Right.
We're asking for the Quint here.
Right. Like wastewater. We didn't approve any wastewater last year.
Let's go to cemetery. I had a question, Joe. Do you have to do the study before the construction?
I think that's a fair point. I've had continual discussions with the cemetery director on that. I know that, I believe for the Island Pond, she was seeking grant opportunities to offset that. But as of this time, I'm not aware that that's been successful yet.
Okay, so we haven't even done the study and we still want to approve a $100,000 construction?
I can
Would it be
only,
done in this?
the cemetery,
would it be done?
director's hope is that both are done.
Okay, I mean, just, we can't go back, but the question is, you're looking at $143,000. Is it needed in 22 or can it be pushed out to 23? Maybe you can get a better definition from her.
Rich?
Yes?
My question, I don't know the details of this project, but just off the bat, it seems a lot to me to spend $43,000 on a project that's going to cost $100,000. I'd almost rather say, is it worth a $43,000 study for something that's only going to cost, twice that? I would personally, I would have to see a lot more defense of that question, because I certainly wouldn't spend $40,000 on a study for something that was only going to cost twice that much. And also, I would add, if grant opportunities are not available, is it intended for these projects, whatever they are, to come out of cemetery funds of some sort?
I think we need a little more definition of this thing, Joe.
Understood, thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
can't we move that forward?
I think we should, Joe.
But my point is, I don't think the 43,000 should be there till we understand it better, because once we commit and spend that, then we're gonna say, well, why not 100,000?
I think we should move it to 24.
I think we should put a relook at this thing, and we can't say no, but we can say indefinitely or whatever, postpone indefinitely.
And that includes the 43,000, correct? Even though that's not our.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
All in favor of moving it to 22, both numbers?
Joe McFarland, aye.
Rich Larius, aye. That's
I'm gonna
three,
say
one more.
Who's aye?
Okay. So Bruce, Joe, can you move it over to 23 and you've got $143,000 left so far?
Yeah, could you tell me again what the vote was, please?
5,
5-0.
5-4.
No, I
Yeah.
said no.
Who said no?
I did. Noreen.
You don't
Because
want to move it?
I think 22 is too close. I would
too.
say move the 43 if you want to for discussion to 23, but not both. I still don't like the idea of spending 40 for a $100,000 project.
So, Mr. Chairman, you need to do your votes by roll call. I apologize for not stating that earlier. And I would ask, it was
Okay.
my understanding that the motion was to carry it over from 22 into 23.
Yes, and that was the motion because I think we need more information.
Sure. And then could you just
my
ask
vote-
each member by name?
Okay. Bruce? Are you in favor of the motion?
Yes, aye.
Angelo?
Aye.
Okay. Noreen?
No,
Okay. Joe?
Aye.
Okay, so it's 4-1.
And again, that was 4-1 to move those from 22 to 23.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Now down to channel 18. We sometimes circumvent getting to 50,000. I'm just asking in terms of if you do meeting rooms, do you need cameras and lighting?
Well, first I'm going to ask if, I think this might be an error on my part.
Okay.
I'm trying to recall, I know there was capital and fiscal year 21 for a similar amount. I'm just trying to run through my notes real quick. Carol, do you know if I'm incorrect on that?
I have the answer, Joe.
Sure.
There was in 21, there was a number of 97,000 for meeting rooms.
Well, if you look at here, meeting rooms is 66,470, and then next year again it's 66,470. Is that a mistake?
I don't have anything in my capital book that even gets to that request.
Okay. Can you check that out, Phil?
Last year's capital was 97, which I thought we approved at town meeting.
We did.
So this is
not
22
here.
of last year. These are new numbers that was represented in last year's capital plan for this year. So it's right where they should be. These are new numbers.
All right. I have information that this was added. I'm recalling this now. It was added prior to COVID from the previous administrator for the items just to be listed. So I think I'm going to assume that we would be okay in holding off on that for 22.
Both numbers?
Question?
Not for 22, for 23. When I'm pushing things forward, we're looking at 22 for approval. And you're saying if we move this, we've got to move it to the next year, which is 23.
Correct. And I'm just waiting to hear the dollar amount that you see there in 23 is related to public safety equipment. Jamie's going to send me more information. So
Okay.
if we could hold on that in the interest of time.
Okay.
Question?
The artificial, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, I'm assuming whatever project this is would be coming out of cable funds, which I don't know the balance, but we usually have a significant balance. And personally, if it's out of cable funds, I would be happy to see anything done with our computer services while we're in this position and continuing to some degree in this position. So I would not want to postpone it because it's out of cable funds.
This should come out of cable funds.
Right.
I'm pleased to report that Noreen is correct because Jamie has told me that and I have no doubt.
It can't-
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry for the confusion.
If
Okay.
that's true, it should be out of the plan.
Well, it should be in the plan, but again, we don't see a column for funding source. Okay. So if it's, my question is, you've got it in you've got 66,470 in 22 and then 66,470 in 23. So is this thing actually costing $133,000?
Mr. Chairman, I can actually speak to that part of it. The similar dollar amount you see for fiscal year 23 supports the previous request of Channel 18, and that's specifically earmarked for public safety.
And it's the same amount as meeting rooms?
Correct. That generally speaking, you'll see that amount, the 66,470 that we see there for fiscal year 22 is meant for the cultural center. And then
Right.
in 23, it's meant for the public safety building.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it's Carol Capola. Could I just update you on the sidewalk?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So last fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, we had reached out to all our department heads asking them to release old article balances. And the DPW director released the $250,000. So it fell to free cash and it's not being carried any longer.
Okay, so the number of 650 is, okay. So you're not carrying the 250 anymore?
We are not. That was appropriated in a town meeting of 2018 for fiscal year 19.
Okay. Conservation?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a request that was made in the fall of 2019, specifically
Right.
for fiscal year 22.
Right.
And it indicates that it's the adding materials to the existing reef. The 250,000 gets to the construction cost, if you will.
Question,
Yeah, I remember that number.
question.
Sure, go ahead.
The last time we did that, $250,000, I thought that was grant money.
So there is a reference to grant money. I don't have specifics on the grant. So there is an expectation that conservation would be seeking and trying to get approval on a grant for that. You're correct.
Hey, Joe, maybe what would help for the next iteration of trying to describe this or look at this thing is that we can, or you can, just like artificial reef, additional projects, just put in there grant money or grants.
Sure.
So, you know, like up in the walkway construction supplemental, you've got grants there. Anything that we don't have to worry about you funding it through the three normal sources, if there's grants involved, you could just put it in there so that we know. I know we're going to find out with the police on their radio and stuff like that.
Very
Okay.
good. Thank you. And again,
That'll-
apologies to the committee.
No, you're not.
I'm struggling
you
through
did
this for the first time, but
No, don't worry about it. You did a good job. Without our help, you could have done this. You didn't need us. This is good. Okay.
thank you.
This is Angelo again. Can I just add something on activities that are paid for by, say, the golf course or the water department or whatever it's paid for? If it's not coming out of the taxes, you should account for that too. So you may need to have a column at the end that indicates where the source of the funds is. And I think we need to know every time we go through this where the sources are. And
Yeah, and we talked about that at the beginning, Angela.
Yeah, well, in terms of the artificial reef, if it has a grant, I vote for it. If it doesn't, I think we need to postpone it. So we need to have that piece of information. And going forward, we're just going to be going around and around in circles until we have the answers. Sorry.
Got that, Joe?
I do, and it's a fair point. Again, I purposely haven't had a sit down with our finance director yet because of the impact on the operating budget first. Again, that was a major shock to the system, if you will. And quite frankly, the message I've been trying to get out to department heads is operating budget comes first, and then we'll follow back on capital. So it's one of the many things that Carol and I will need to follow up on very shortly.
Sure.
Question,
If
Rick?
you need our, go ahead.
Yep.
I'm sorry, my turn. You know, other years, there are certain projects that we want very much, and we look for grants, but then we often, you know, do it with our own funds anyway. I would propose that this year that there may not be anything like that. There may be a whole slew of projects that if we can get grants, sure, we'll do them, but otherwise we're just going to postpone them. I mean, that's how I feel anyway.
I agree.
I don't
No
think that-
argument here.
I think as we go through it, we should just acknowledge the fact on some of these projects that if we don't get a grant, we're not gonna do it this year. That's just my opinion.
Let's give
And
Joe
this-
the opportunity. Wait a
Yeah,
minute, Lori,
okay,
please.
just-
Let Joe have the opportunity to review this with Carol and to see where grants are appropriate. And then again, we're gonna have to meet again. And, you know, to go on what you just said, if there's no grants, then we just postpone it.
Right.
I'm in 100% agreement, but I think it's questionable right now where the grants and where are we in the process of grants on all these things. So Joe, we're just going to have to go through it and, you know, let you, Carol, do a little more work on it. And, you know, we can talk about it again, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. I agree, and I appreciate that. And quite frankly, you know, thrown off my game a little bit because of pandemic effects this week, but, you know, we also don't know. Well, what I do know is a town like Harwich, we've had our employees working since July 6th in buildings. We've done it very safely and we've done it smart, but it's still an impact on the general public. Having said that, my understanding is there is no state agency that has any significant presence in the state buildings. And so we don't
Okay.
even know what the impacts are going to be on those grant
Right.
producing agencies.
Right, and I think if you can define for us the grant, and if they've heard, in other words, I'm just picking like the sidewalk, and it says grant $1 million. So where are we on that? I mean, have we heard anything? You know, I'm just saying, whatever we can postpone, I think we should postpone. I'm with Noreen 100%.
Yep.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank
Let's
you
go
all.
to engineering. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I do not agree. I think we have to do them item by item, but go ahead.
Yeah, we do have to do item by item, but we're going to give Joe an opportunity to take these 4 pages back, look at line by line, and define which ones are actually grantable. We can't tell. We're just defining, is that a grant or not? Well, we got to find out. So we'll give Joe a little
I got
more time to, yeah, and then we have to just decide, should we push it forward or not? I'm with you 100%. And I think you are too, Joe McFarland.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
as usual. Okay. Can we step down to engineering?
Mr. Chairman, I would say wholeheartedly yes, because I can actually speak to this one. So
Okay.
as you may recall, our engineer, Griffin Ryder, has brought the town into compliance with the MS4 stormwater program. And so the town is required to have the funding that you see there year over year. So this is one of those items that I fully expect that the town is going to have to find a way to fund it. And we don't expect there to be sufficient revenue to be generated from permit applications to do that. To my knowledge, I believe the engineer has worked on the first official application for an MS4 permit. And if I recall correctly, the revenue generated or the fee generated from that is about $1,200. So I do
Okay.
expect this to be an obligation of the town, and a significant portion of it will need to be funded by the town because we don't,
Okay, and
we
that
haven't amassed
and
any
this-
of the dollars yet.
And this is a deferral, right? This was on last year's plan.
Correct.
Okay, so we're good. Any questions on that? Good. Engineering or facilities maintenance, DPW. So this is actually one we have to look at. Unfortunately, we don't have Peter Wall with us to tell us if Brooks Library really needs a roof.
Question,
But, we're gonna have, sorry,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Aren't most of those financed with CPC funds?
a good question. I don't know.
Let me grab my other book. I was with CPC last night.
This says Brooks Academy Structural Improvement Project, 785,000.
I'm sorry, I missed that reference.
This says the on the plan for us to look at is 148.5 for the roof. If you go to CPC, as Bruce is saying, there's a catch-all that says Brooks Academy Structural Improvement Project.
Right.
So
Brooks
is that-
Library versus Brooks Academy.
One's the library.
Oh, one's the library. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
But to Bruce's question, and for fiscal year 22, there is no application from CPC for the Brooks Library roof. There is none.
Okay.
What
Was
about
this
the- was the 148.5 on the former plan?
Yes.
I don't
Yes?
remember it.
It
Yes.
was.
Okay. And I'm going to ask a stupid question. Does it really need a new roof?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we're going to hear from the library director that it does. And I know that she did submit with her
Yes.
budget materials, which were due last Friday, that Carol and I will need to dive into. She had an additional capital request, but given that I wanted to be able to say to you all that this plan does not include any new requests, I haven't even viewed that yet to vet it.
Okay.
So
So what we
Motion.
see here was in last year's plan.
that's my understanding.
Could that library roof be funded out of free cash?
I think you need to let Joe give us a source column. That's a good question. Unfortunately, when Joe does the analysis, he's going to have to find out where's it coming from. And I think out of free cash may be the one to go with. So we're opening up the opportunity for you, Joe.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. I have a concern on the cultural center. Put them together, it's almost $250,000. Close to $250,000 on what I don't know what the life expectancy is on the cultural center. Anybody know? Anybody want to venture a guess?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I couldn't hazard a guess on the viability, or however you said that. I apologize, but I do know in speaking with the Cultural Center Director that she's what I consider to be midway through the evaluated period that the Selectmen had established for the use of that building. And
Yeah.
so my concern is that unless and until a specific proposal comes before the board that would change our thinking on that, not putting money into that is going to answer the question for us, and probably not in the way that we necessarily want. So, and I know that there's also the operational offset that in years past has been used. I believe it was free cash. And if you recall, for Cultural Center, I believe we relied upon the Cultural Center revolving fund to fund that operational offset for fiscal year 21. I don't know what
Anybody
the
have any-
balance is yet, but I'm not averse to doing that again.
Anybody have any ideas on these two numbers on the Capital Outlay Committee?
Yes, Rich?
Yes.
On these two, I'm inclined to say they're so basic that unless we were going to raise the building, which doesn't seem likely right this minute, it would seem that we would have to put those items, generators and boilers in anyway for basic maintenance, so. Regardless of the life or whether we're gonna sell it or use it or whatever.
Well, this is one of the things that I think we talked about last year. If I'm not, what is the difference between fixing something and giving it some life, than rather replacing it in total? And if we're midway through an evaluation period, what we're going to do with the building, I would really like to know what is the fixed number rather than a replacement number. And if it can be fixed. I mean, it's one of these expenses. You know, when you look in the big scheme of things of 20 million, you're looking at 160 and 70. You know, every little bit helps. You know, like for us at home, you know, do you fix your old car or do you buy a new one? I'll add another one. If you're retired and you're only putting, 1,000 miles on your car a year, what do you want to do? You want to buy a new one, or do you want to, fix the old one? Yeah.
Rich, lately hearing Griffin talk in the past year when he spoke before us, they've been very successful in getting generators of like sort that they've been able to move from one building to another if needed. So I'd be interested to know if the 70,000, if for whatever reasons we didn't have a cultural center, would in fact, still have some value somewhere else in the town. Because last year I asked Griffin, what does it matter that much if the cultural center is shut down when we lose power and or have a snowstorm? And he reminded me of the pipes freezing. So it would be interesting to know what remaining value the $70,000 generator might have if it wasn't attached to the cultural center.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Further info.
Sorry?
Further info needed, I guess.
Joe, can you help us out on that one? On these two?
Well, just that, these were original requests that were brought up in 19 that were added. So these are regular fiscal year 22 requests. And
Okay.
in looking at the facilities manager report, the generator is an emergency generator. And I
Right.
will argue that we have tenants in those buildings. We
Right.
did not have tenants for a significant period of time because of the pandemic. But we're running into this problem with the community center as well. So emergency generators obviously are critical, and the boiler itself, the simple answer on that is it has lasted beyond its anticipated useful life. So
Okay.
we're taking a chance on that one.
Okay. Okay. That's your input, Joe. We need it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so,
Rich?
yes.
Before we leave this section, I had a question on the next page, but same section, the DPW fencing.
Yeah, so
yeah.
that was
So-
an original fiscal year 22 request. Similar situation where the fence that was constructed was meant to last a useful lifetime of 20 years. It's my understanding that its useful lifetime has come and gone. So this would be to replace the fence that the neighbors were looking for privacy and block pedestrian access many years ago.
Right, and I would say to that we've just had a year that nobody expected in a million years. So I would hope that some fencing could be put off. And I would hope our, residents and neighbors would understand that this was an unusual situation, and something like that would certainly be looked at as soon as we got back on our feet and knew what was going on in the world.
This is one of those things where if it's a hindrance to a neighbor, if in fact parts of it are down and there is no distinction and there is no privacy. I wouldn't want to be one of those neighbors with a fence that's failing in front of me, okay?
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know what the fence looks like, so I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, we're gonna have to do it in, we approved it in good faith, and we're just gonna have to stay with it, I feel.
I'm with you, Rich.
I would
Yeah.
say personally no to that because, as Joe said, this was on the plan like 3 years ago. And from my brief experience, we don't usually look out 4, 5, 6 years and really discuss things. So I don't
No,
remember any
he said the
discussion.
life, he said the life of it.
If that were going to be the case, then I'd want to have a lengthy discussion about the mechanic shop for 1.2 million in 5 years, you know,
Okay,
so.
we haven't gotten there yet. Okay,
Okay.
so,
Can I ask you a question? On
Sure.
the cultural center, has anybody put together the total costs that we spend on the cultural center and what we have collected from the cultural center to see where we're going? And I don't mean just
well,
what is charged to the cultural center, but, you know, how much is spent by
well,
the DPW.
you have, Angelo, you have your chairman on the phone, and that's part of FinCom.
Okay,
So the expenses, the yearly expenses, the income, how it affects the operating budget, that's FinCom.
okay.
That's-
Well,
That's
it's
probably,
also
probably,
impacts whether we should make this judgment positive or negative. It also impacts on that.
you're talking about the expense of a generator and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was my question, is how long, you know, we approved it last time, and I just wanted to move this thing forward. And Joe Powers made a point about where we are in it, and basically it's sort of an expense, a capital expense that we're gonna have to eat if we're, you know, if the building is, remember, I mean, whether they heat the whole building or not, if it was to freeze, you're gonna pay more than $70,000 for plumbers come in and replace piping and so forth. So there's, you know,
Pipes off.
pardon me?
I said, you can always, if you're not doing anything, then you can turn on for water. So let's not get into that kind of a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you do it in your house, you turn your hose tubes off.
Right.
Anyway. That's an area of discussion, and maybe Joe Powers can follow up on it and give us some more information. But, you know, we're not going to come up with an answer right now. How about fire? Now, most of this, I would think, is grants, and I know we approved it. Should there be, I mean, a lot of the votes, Joe Powers, that we take were positive. Should there be funding called grants?
Sure.
Okay, so when we look at the radio, we've been looking at this thing 2 or 3 years in a row, and I can't understand why it hasn't happened yet. That and the air pack. This
So
am
I can
correct?
speak to the air pack, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Yeah, so the, looking at the previous submittal by the fire chief, or who at the time was deputy fire chief, the 2-year self-contained breathing apparatus that you see there for 22 and 23 was the town-funded portion, and he indicates in his narrative if the grant was unsuccessful. So we know that the grant was successful. And so I believe that those are no longer necessary. I would like to do just a perfunctory check with the chief to make sure I've said that correctly, but I think
Okay.
those would be coming off.
Okay.
With regard to the radios,
Yeah.
I will admit I'm a little bit confused, only because I know there was an effort by the police department to update radios, but I don't know if that's the same program. What he indicated in his report last year is that the year 1 of public safety radio program was moved to fiscal year 22 because the system was not yet ready for a changeover. So
Okay.
I can validate that one with him as well if you'd like.
Okay. So 200 and
then,
200.
The staff car is the one that I'd really need to have a frank discussion with them on.
Yeah, that's been an issue, I think 3 years ago at town meeting. That really got beat up, that staff car,
Right.
chief's car, whatever car. And, you know, so I just question it, and you might want to follow up on that one.
Certainly.
It didn't happen 2 or 3 years ago. It got turned down. Okay, so then you have the Quint, and that number's been pushed forward, correct?
Correct.
So we're
And
looking,
the original plan was debt exclusion, I believe.
okay. So that's basically, if this thing was, I mean, we're looking at 200 off here and maybe another 200, 400 grand perhaps off here. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All of this golf stuff is just coming out of the golf revolving fund.
So, no, based on his original plan, it was a combination of budgeted items and the golf improvement fund. So I'd have to go back to Roman and validate which was which.
But in any event, none of it coming out of the taxpayers.
Right.
Well, I didn't know it was referenced by budget.
That's a different terminology that we haven't used before, Joe.
Okay,
No, I'm talking about Joe Powers.
Right.
okay.
I understood your meaning.
I have a problem like with various mowing equipment per lease, 87,000. Was that 80? It appears to be 87,000 per year. That is operating expense. It's not a capital budget expense. If their lease cost is 87 grand a year, they got to take it out of that's a budget item.
Why is it a budget item?
Pardon me?
Why would you consider it a budget item? So whatever these are, if they added together to be 350,000, why would that?
Unless it's a capital lease and we're going to end up owning it, I could see perhaps it running this way. If it's just paying off the lease, it's like paying rent. It's an annual expense.
I
It's budget.
assumed it was leased to purchase, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, I'm just throwing it out to you. You're correct. It's almost 350 grand over 4 years. But the question, are we going to own it at the end?
Right.
So,
We don't
I mean,
ever
Joe,
own the golf carts.
I'm sorry?
We don't ever own the golf carts. They're always
It's not
in
golf carts. It's mowing equipment.
mowing equipment the same.
So it's on a continuing lease?
I believe so.
So you may recall the board voted at their meeting on Monday to execute a 5-year lease with John Deere through TD Bank. And in fact, with Carol returning, I believe the closing on that is today. And so the expectation is that we would be leasing on an annual basis for 5 years for that equipment. I don't believe it
Okay.
ended in a purchase.
Okay, so it's an expense.
Carol, did you
But
hear
isn't
that? And if I captured that right?
Hi,
Is it-
is it a purchase of $1? Is that what the question
Yeah.
was? Whether the lease ends in a purchase?
Yes.
Now, the question is the lease payment per year a capital expense or a budgeted expense? And
It's a budget expense
you do municipal funding, municipal accounting, so which one is it?
So the item is budgeted in the golf department's budget under rentals and leases of equipment.
Do we own
Is
it?
it,
now?
is it a budgeted expense?
Yes,
And why does it appear to be a capital expense?
In total, this is just under $500,000 purchase. So the town first purchases the equipment and then provides a funding source through a lease.
So we do own it? Is that,
Same, you know, we go through the same process as if we were going to bond the project. We're use bond counsel, we have our general counsel. So, you know, I mean, you could say that it doesn't belong in your capital plan, but it is a significant decision on behalf of the town to fund these equipment.
I understand that, but you would also fund it if it was in their budget, correct? As an operating expense? Aren't lease payments operating expenses?
I mean, lease payments are operating expenses, debt payments are operating expenses as well. So you may be funding some of these projects like the Quint. If you decide to fund that project, you would be funding that project with a debt exclusion. So the town will go out and market and sell bonds, and those are items that we budget for. Okay, so given that premise, if this lease was $350,000, to go out and fund it that way, then it wouldn't be in 4 years or 5 years. All I'm saying is, I mean, if this is the way the municipal accounting picks it up, my point is why, and there's golf funding, there's a golf, you know, totally different. This is being paid by the taxpayer, $87,000 a year, when it's an operating expense. Is it not? It's not like buying a truck where it's a one-shot deal for $80,000. Or the irrigation system, which you're maintaining, you're fixing, you're upgrading an asset. You're not doing that with getting lease payments. I'm questioning it. If I'm incorrect, so be it. My job is to question it.
can I ask two things?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm still trying to find out if we own it at the end anyway, and we do.
She said for $1.
Okay, good. That's the way I used to run it at another town. But at any rate, when we do the operating budget, Rich, don't we usually have a lengthy list, which is, this is funded by taxpayer money, free cash, and golf receipts, and this receipt, and that receipt, and cable funds? And isn't in fact the golf department one of that list that is and golf receipts? So therefore, it's not, just because it's in the budget doesn't mean it's funded by taxpayer dollars. Is that true, Carol?
I would agree, that's true.
Okay, so there you go, Rich.
Okay, so we're not coming out of golf dollars.
Yeah.
But let me add something to that. The golf, I believe, pays for most of its activities, but they can't come up with $350,000 more than they need. So they need to pay for things over time, but they end up paying for it.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as, you know, I'm looking at dollars over 50 grand and we don't have to approve it. If it's coming out of golf funding. It's one of those things that's almost like grants or whatever. They have their own piggy bank and it's coming out of that, correct?
Last year, we approved them when they were coming out of special buckets. I mean, whatever, it doesn't, you know.
Okay,
So,
we're good.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just weigh in quickly on that.
Sure.
My assumption was, and I know that's a bad word, but my assumption was that the reason why we're being a document like this is because this document is meant to alert the community on any and all items that we're working on that are outside the normal operating budget. You know, you look at the operating budget as salary and wages and then general expenses. So I would think that it's captured in this document as a way for the public to be aware that this is happening, not that necessarily everything in this document is to be funded directly by taxpayer funds.
Okay, but is it included when you approve the capital plan? It's included in the 2 million, and when you just said general expenses, are operating expenses in general expenses?
Yes.
That's fine. We're good. I just questioned it. That's why they pay me the big bucks, you know?
Right.
Okay. Harbor Master, 2 million.
Question?
I have a question.
Mr. Chairman,
I
Yes,
have a question.
McFarland.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding with respect to this is that, that the harbor master is not even close to getting this project started. At the very least, I mean, I don't know enough to know about if the number's right, but that we should at least kick it forward to the next fiscal year.
Question. 20 years ago, we paid for a study on this jetty, and we never implemented the study. Last year, we approved money for a study, and as far as I know, the study has never been completed. I'd like to move the Allen's Harbor reconstruction project for $2 million, at least 2 or 3 years forward. We're just not ready for it.
I would agree.
Mr. Powers, you got input from the voters. Not voters, boaters.
I took that meaning, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't argue against where you're coming from. The only concern I want to express is what I've seen first as my time as assistant town administrator dealing with procurement, and now as the interim administrator. For a lot of these projects, we account for what we assume to be the construction costs, but we don't anticipate other costs unrelated to construction. So not necessarily the study that you mentioned, but perhaps updated design work or funding related to legal requirements and anything else. So while we may not be ready for construction, I would like to validate whether we need to set aside a portion of money that would at least allow us to do the interim work that gets you from study to construction, which may be design. Because we ran into that with, I believe it was Round Cove project, where if you recall, there was funding that was approved, I believe in 19, where funding had to be added in 20 because we didn't account for all the related costs to that project. And this is a concern of mine that I articulated last night with regard to community preservation projects as well. So I don't disagree with pushing off the construction, but I want to make sure that this dollar amount request included additional costs, because if we don't have that, we know the construction costs are going to go up because of inflation, but is it going to be insufficient because we didn't have design costs?
Well, the thing I think that Bruce is bringing up is that 2 or 3 years ago, there was a study and design number that was approved, and nothing ever happened with it. I don't know if it was ever done.
Okay.
And not only that, this particular project has really far-reaching consequences for the people that are living along the beach on the easterly side of that jetty. And I gotta tell you, that jetty cannot be extended. And I wanna see the results of that study before I approve another penny for this project.
Rich?
Anything else?
I'd like to make a motion that we move the $2 million to year 24.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have no problem pushing it over to 24. And one should understand that what they're talking about doing here is running the end of that jetty at an angle similar to the one that's at Witchmere Harbor. It's not going to go right straight out. It's going to go out at an angle. I'm no maritime engineer, but that's the way they have to do it, when and if they do it.
Mr. Chairman, just procedurally, is there a second to the motion?
Yes,
Yeah.
I second it. I second it.
Thank you.
Rich?
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, so, listening to what Joe said, I sympathize with the position administrators get in with permits and everything else. My only problem is that the study isn't even done yet. So, I mean,
Yeah,
by approving extra money, we're almost presuming that we're going to agree with the study to go ahead to do permits. So that's hard for me, because I understand the
Oh.
position you're in, Joe, but I mean, you know, the study isn't even done. It hasn't been presented. I actually asked at our last meeting on March 7th, our budget meeting, I asked John when the study was going to be done. Of course, we didn't know what was going to happen. So even though I sympathize with the position you're in, I'm agreeing with Bruce Nightingale that I can't.
Okay,
go
so basically let me ask for a vote. And I understand the definition of why. The motion is to move the $2 million to 24, and that the committee needs more information on the status of the status and results of the study. All in favor?
You have to do a roll
Joe.
call, Mr. Chairman.
I'm doing it. Joe, not you, Joe, the other Joe. McFarland.
Aye.
Okay. Angelo.
Aye.
Okay. Noreen?
Aye.
Who am I missing?
Bruce?
Bruce.
Bruce votes aye.
Okay, and Rich is aye. 5. So we're
Mr.
moving it.
Chairman, if I
Take
could
two.
very quickly.
Sure.
Just on that, just to finalize that, first of all, thank you for the clarity on that. And I just want to add to what Noreen said. I don't take anything that you all said as contrary to what I was talking about. In fact, I think
Mhm.
we're on the same page. I just wanted you to be aware that I'm going forward, saying to anyone with a project, you need to make sure that you're not just focused on construction or materials or anything else, that you have to be more encompassing of the true cost for procurement. And this is helpful in that regard. So I know we remain on the same page, Noreen.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm happy. Okay, let's go to page 3. This is links 700,000 and 700,000. We approve it every year. Not that this is anything different, but we voted on this. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, so Route 39 and Pleasant Bay Road roundabout, if needed, and my answer is no. But anyway, is this
That needs to come out of the plan.
Is this a study or is this the actual cost of the roundabout? The if needed is
I'm
sort of
struggling to
like,
catch up to find the materials.
I have a question back on the previous
the
line.
materials to build the roundabout or the materials that are literally if needed?
Mr. Chairman?
I'm asking Joe Powers a question.
And I'm struggling
Okay.
to find it in the book, my notes that I have.
Can I ask a question?
Joe McFarland was first.
Oh,
Go ahead, McFarland.
I just want to point out to you all, if you get a minute, if you want to see a good reason why not to have a roundabout, take a ride down 28 to
Yes.
the Chatham line.
Right beyond Ocean State and the
Yes,
Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes,
Yes,
what a mess.
that's real smart. 2 roundabouts in 100 feet.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I understand that roundabout is no longer required. They've cut down some trees They put in some striping on the road. I don't believe there have been any accidents there since the improvements are made. I'd like to see that roundabout come out of the plan completely.
I would, since I live like a quarter of a mile away, there's a solar stop sign. The trees have been cut down. There's been new striping of the street. And I haven't heard any ambulances in a long, long time. It would be a real difficult, I mean, I'm not an engineer, I can't speak to, but I really think to have it in there with the caveat, if needed, come on. Either, you know, it's a black and white plan kind of thing, you know, do you need it or don't you need it? Not if needed.
Well,
So
the
I'm
plan
sorry?
had taken quite a bit of property from private owners, and it just
Yes.
is not gonna sell. We really need
Yes.
to take it out of the plan.
Mr. Powers, you're hearing us.
Yes, I heard a motion and a second, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to delete the roundabout from the plan.
Second,
I'll second that
Okay, let me-
motion.
Angelo?
Aye.
Angelo?
Yes?
Are you a yes on that?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay. And I'm the fifth.
We didn't vote.
Powers? Pardon me?
All I did was make a motion. I didn't vote.
Make the motion again so we can vote.
I
I
move,
make the motion. Go ahead.
I move that we delete the roundabout on the capital plan.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
We have a motion.
And I second that motion.
Okay, we have Joe McParland seconding the motion. I'll take a roll call here. Noreen?
Yes.
Angelo?
Aye.
Joe McParland?
Yes,
Bruce?
yes,
And Rich? Yes.
Thank you.
I have
Got
a
it?
question.
Go ahead.
I have a question on the line above, if I could. It's one I've asked before. You know, because people will look at these and a lot of people actually think that we spend, you know, the money for the gas tax allocation. And I know this is just a way to present it, but it always bothers me that that's in the capital plan because, I mean, that's the money that we get, correct? Or not? The second 700,000 down, isn't that money that we receive from our gas tax? No matter what else we do, we get it anyway. So I don't understand why it's in this plan.
I can only assume that it was put there by my predecessor just to account for it.
And I used to argue with him about it also, Joe, just so you
For
know.
the record, I'm not gonna
I think every town administrator that I've worked with has had that there to show that the actual costs or the plan is $1.4 million. And this is where we're getting the other 700,000 from.
That, and I'll end it here, but I'm just gonna say, I think this is very confusing to the taxpayers. Maybe a note, you know, in the line to tell them this is money that we receive, you know, not that
Yeah.
we're taking out of their pocket might be helpful. That's all. We can go.
I think the answer to that is the 5-year road maintenance plan should somewhere say $1.4 million.
Well, whatever, that's all right. I'm happy.
Okay.
Doesn't-
Okay, thank you, Noreen, for stirring the pot.
All right.
Okay, page 4. And this
So,
is where Mr.
Well,
Yeah, really, Mr. Chairman, you'll see under wastewater,
Wait a
all
minute,
three of those
Joe,
items
Joe,
are,
Joe
sorry.
Powers, Joe.
Yep.
I think somebody threw something in before you. Did somebody have something to say before Joe Powers spoke?
sorry.
Public Works is another 330,000.
Those are his trucks and equipment and stuff. there's
Okay.
a vehicle listing or the inventory he throws up.
We're saying we just agree with it and just move on?
Yeah,
May I ask, just let me vet it. I will just add quickly that I was a town employee elect when I sat through the May 2019 town meeting, and that was never lost on me, town meeting's reaction to vehicle replacements. So I would like the opportunity to vet that directly with the Director of Public Works.
Thank you.
okay. He normally, see what we're missing here, Joe, and I'll bring it up again. Every one of these departments would come before us. They were given half hour, 15 minutes to a half hour department, depending how big the department was. And Link would come in and give us all the inventory of the equipment and the value and what he needed to be replaced. We're missing that this year.
Understood.
So we're going to have to take his word for it. That's where we're coming from.
Right?
And Link, and it's always been proven he runs a very, very good shop.
No argument here.
Okay. Can we go to page 4 now?
One suggestion,
Who is it?
Doug Chory. I think a dump truck is more than $17,000.
And if
What he's asking for.
I believe there was a
What he's
trade-in
asking-
component there, but I have to validate that.
Well, he's asking for it. We're not going to question it. It's under $50,000.
No way a six-wheel dump truck is $17,000. It's more like $117,000.
It's not ours to question. It's not over
I'm gonna
50.
get it. Someone has to question them.
Maybe it's
Go
just,
ahead.
maybe it's
You
just the
do it.
roll-off, John. Maybe it's just the roll-off container. Who knows?
No, the point's well taken. It was a scrivener's error by me carrying it over. It's 175,000.
Hey, there we
Okey-dokey.
go.
Ah,
That's why I didn't care about it when it was 17.
Well, I will correct that, but I will still vet that with the DPW director. The van is, as was requested, 35,000.
Okie dokie. You're in trouble, Mr. Powers. You're just stirring the pot.
I was waiting for my errors to show up and haunt me. Angelo, have you rejoined us?
Pardon?
Angelo?
He's here.
I think there was a drop off on the system.
It's me. No.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back, John.
Thank you.
Got to pay your bill, Angela.
That's a problem.
Okay, so now we're on wastewater, and this is where Joe Powers becomes the speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, fortunately, I'm very well vetted on this one. Those dollar amounts that you see there first are carryovers and very much subject to change. You may recall that, or you may have heard that the Board of Selectmen had a dedicated meeting, a special meeting on Tuesday of this week, Tuesday, December 8th, dedicated to all topics related to wastewater. So we talked about the East Harwich sewer service areas, which encompasses the Pleasant Bay projects. We talked about the DHY proposals, and we talked about the comprehensive wastewater management plan generally. And I've worked on trying to keep track of those discussions to then, those are the elements, if you will, of wastewater. And then the components within those elements are finance questions, governance questions, and operations questions. The selectmen are scheduled to take up on Monday, December 14th, a discussion, but no anticipated vote on the draft agreement for the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth Clean Water Partnership. So that is the first substantive discussion that board will have on that topic at that night. And then the board has begun the process of evaluating, but has not made any determinations yet relative to a contract 3 to complete phase 2 of the East Harwich Pleasant Bay project. That number of 8.4 million is almost certainly going to change in an upward direction. The question is whether the town is going to commit to that in fiscal year 22 It's an ongoing discussion by the Board of Selectmen.
These numbers then are what we used to call in the old day placeholder numbers.
That's how I'm viewing them, Mr. Chairman.
That works for me. Does it work for everybody else until we get them better defined?
That's what I was gonna
Sure.
suggest.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so you got that, Joe. We got you
Yep, thank
covered.
you.
Okay. Then we go down to water, but water is going to be funded by water, correct?
Correct, and I think these were carryovers, but that's correct.
Okay. So we've gone through the whole thing and we're questioning, I just ran a little tally, almost 2.8 million going through the departments, and then we're bringing back 160. So about $2.5 million are in question in terms of, you know, the arboretum, the boiler replacement and the generator, you know, what's the life, just taking that as a question. The police radio and the air pack, if its grant doesn't come off. We're moving the $2 million from the jetty. We're increasing the pickup, or the six-wheel dump truck, you know, almost 150 grand the other way. So in essence, we're talking, I don't know, 2.7, $2.6 million less than 20.3 million, Joe.
Thank you.
That's just, those are just, you know, I just wrote them down and see if they, but we're moving 2 million automatically. So that drives it to 18.3, and then some little ones like 200,000 and 200,000 or whatever. So we got the number down a bit.
Absolutely, and
Everybody
thank you,
agree?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Why don't we do this, Joe? If you can take the changes that we made and we questioned, and maybe you can better get a definition. If you can zip us another copy or an updated version dated 12/11 perhaps,
Absolutely, without question.
before John's meeting. John's meeting's the 15th. No,
Correct.
the 21st we're concerned about. The 21st.
Right. But I would like
I mean,
to
that-
get that to John for his meeting on the 15th to update what I've sent him already.
Yeah, send us a copy too, so we know what's going to
Absolutely.
be discussed. Yeah, and then I invite everybody to join if they can. John's meeting, I sent you all a note about that, and then I sent you a note that should you have the chance, if you want to join the Selectmen meeting, it's the same process that we just went through. What you do is go to the website, go to Selectmen, go to agendas, you get a page, and on that page, you call in the number, and here's the 9 digits to get in as access. Correct, Mr. Powers?
That is correct. I just would add that at present, the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, that has not been posted as a joint meeting with the Capital Outlay Committee. So I
That's
was
okay.
prepared to present the plan based on this meeting today.
Sure.
It doesn't prevent anyone from attending, but it would impact on your ability to speak, because that could constitute deliberation outside of a meeting.
No, I don't want to. There's no deliberation outside the meeting on my part. So we'll let you.
And then-
We believe in
There-
you, Joe, and you can rock and roll with the numbers.
Thank you. And there's a member who has patiently had her hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Noreen,
Thank you, Rich. So,
I can tell it too.
I know that we don't want to get too into the weeds with this discussion, but I have to ask because our chair just asked for a new copy with changes. So naturally, that makes me ask, with the changes that were done from that poorly worded article 2 years ago to the way the Capital Outlay Committee functions, I'm not really sure it's okay for us to just go ahead and change it. I thought those changes took the votes of 3 parties, us, the Finance Committee, and the Board of Selectmen. Like, I don't know if we can just delete the roundabout. I mean, I just don't know. It's just, I'm just putting it out there for somebody to think about, people to think about.
Okay,
because-
why don't we do this? I haven't ended the meeting. How do you reverse a vote?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could offer some advice in response. I think
Sure.
it's appropriate for this committee to make the motions that you've made and the votes that you made because it expresses the sentiments of this charter-created body, which is
Okay.
on par with Finance Committee and Town Meeting.
Yeah.
To Noreen's point, if I may, several months ago, I advised the board that I need to rely upon a bylaw charter review committee, which at present does not exist, because I would need to work with them to reach out to the original sponsors of the article that I understand it at 2019 was in some way presented incorrectly, because it talks about amending the capital outlay process and creating a 5-year plan, but through Scrivener's errors, the 5 remained as a 7. And so I've already put the Board of Selectmen on notice, if I can say it that way, that I need the assistance of a bylaw charter review committee, as well as council's opinion that what am I to do based on the votes of town meeting and the charter changes, because I share some of the concerns that the member just mentioned.
And-
Who still has her hand?
And let me say, I wasn't in any way suggesting that we reverse the votes that we took today. I was just throwing it out there that, like other years, once we voted something, the plan would just change, and that may not be the case anymore. You know, we should vote what we feel anyway.
Right.
Okay, now what I was saying is if there's an issue, especially on that roundabout, getting rid of it, what we can vote on is moving it or postponing it because we need more information. We do that all the time.
I don't know
So
if we can
Joe,
vote on it anymore, to tell you the truth, but.
well,
I'll wait for- Yeah.
I'm throwing it to Mr. Powers.
I firmly believe in this. I will.
What we've done is good.
Yeah, I will use resume for a moment and say that from a parliamentary standpoint, given your authority under the charter, you have the right to take the actions that you've taken. The question comes on in concert with the 2 other bodies, and that will just have to be fleshed out. And I will be reminding, and it's a timely comment by your colleague on the board, Noreen, because I have notes for it for Monday night's meeting, but also ahead of an anticipation of Selectmen's meeting on the 21st. And, you know, what you've done today is, in my opinion, is entirely proper and appropriate. The question remains, how do we do it going forward? And,
Okay.
and it
Joe,
requires opinions.
Can I add a footnote to your presentation or whatever your thought process is?
Certainly.
Okay, no, God, somebody else is talking. The footnote is that no one, underline, no one on the Capital Outlay Committee was ever asked, invited, or written to, corresponded with those changes that were made to the plan and to the process that we've dedicated our time for more than 10 years apiece. And it's an insult to everyone on this phone that's a member of the Capital Outlay Committee. We dedicate time, sometimes 2 times a week for 4 months, and we were never even asked about, hey, there's a change, what do you think? It's just a footnote. And I've expressed that to you in person, and I know I've talked to the other, my committee, I think feels the same way because we have discussed it.
I have never lost sight of our conversation, Mr. Chair. And as the former chair of the bylaw charter review before that board, I can understand exactly the sentiments of this board and that reaction. Totally justified.
You can't tell somebody, this is the way you make spaghetti, and then say to them, well, you're not going to be using spaghetti sauce, so you better find a new way. Anyway, that's my thought. Any other questions
Yeah.
or thoughts? We'll be getting a new revised plan from Mr. Powers, and if you want to call me personally, and if we need to get a meeting or a call going, we can. But we know that this is for the Board of Selectmen. So that's the one that we're concerned about, that if you can join in, join in.
Before we end, I have a couple questions. Joe, when you put out another copy of the plan, would it be a good idea for you to show us which items are gonna be funded by CPC?
Yes, absolutely.
And my second question is, I think the land bank debt has been paid off or is about to be paid off. Is that gonna give us a lot more CPC funds availability?
I will defer to the finance director who has educated me time and again that I believe it's fiscal year 24, but I will defer to Carol on that.
That's correct. Fiscal year 24, all of the debt, the land bank debt will be paid off.
That
So
was like 800,000 a year?
for FY 22, it's $240,000. This year,
Okay.
it's 340. It goes down every year.
Thank you.
Do we make a payment in 24 or is it done in 24?
So we make a payment, that's the last payment, and it's in 24, and the debt is extinguished.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you, Bruce.
okay, do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Second,
Joe Mc-
Mr. Powers, thank you for hosting this.
Thank you all very much. Much better than I thought, and easier for me going on from here. So thank you all. And Mr. Chairman of Finance Committee, I'll be getting this information to you and Capital as soon as I can. Thanks, everybody.
nice to
Take
see
care,
you.
Joe.
Okay,
Stay well.
Thank you, Rich.
bye, everybody.
Bye, Rich.
Bye-bye.
Bye.